Hello, I'm Lieutenant Matt Murphy of the Washington State Liquor and Cannabis Board. Today we'll be discussing the Responsible Cannabis Sales Training Class, promoting public safety and trust through fair administration and enforcement of cannabis laws. Here are the topics we're going to be discussing today. General information about cannabis laws and rules, who can purchase cannabis products, what are the penalties for selling to a minor, checking identification, acceptable forms of ID, Washington ID security features, fraudulent use of ID, and compliance checks. So here's some general information about cannabis laws and rules. State law describes mandatory actions employees and the licensee must follow. State law is determined by the state legislature or initiative like I-502. For purpose of this training, state law refers to the Revised Code of Washington, RCW, and the Washington Administrative Code, WAC. Here's some general information about cannabis rules and laws. Store policy dictates how employees will implement state law. Store policies are determined by the store's licensees or management. Store policies cannot be less restrictive than state law. Here's some examples of store policy. Every employee is responsible for checking all people that come into their store. Another example is employees are not allowed to accept expired or vertical format IDs. Please remember at all times you must obey state law. Here's a question. Is it a right or a privilege for customers to purchase cannabis products? The answer, B. It is a privilege with no legal right to buy. You control and are responsible for every sale of cannabis you make. If you're unsure about the person, remember, just don't sell. Who can purchase marijuana products? At a retail cannabis store, any person over the age of 21 can purchase. For medical cannabis products, however, any person 21 or older may purchase general use and high CBD medical cannabis products. Qualifying patients or designated providers with a valid Washington State medical recognition card may purchase high THC medical cannabis products. Some minors, 18 to 20 years of age, may purchase retail or medical cannabis products. Qualifying patients between 18 and 21 years of age with the Washington State recognition card may enter and remain on the premise of the retail outlet holding the medical marijuana endorsement. So the retail store has to have the medical marijuana endorsement in order to sell medical marijuana. Minor patients may purchase the cannabis products for their personal medical use after obtaining a recognition card. People under the age of 18 with a Washington State recognition card or authorization paperwork and must be accompanied by their designated provider may enter and remain in the licensed premises holding that medical cannabis endorsement. The person under 18 may not purchase products for their personal use. The juvenile patient's designated provider may purchase cannabis for the juvenile after they obtain the recognition card for the juvenile. What are the penalties for selling to a minor? Selling cannabis to a minor may result in criminal charges being filed against the person who sold. So it's the person, the clerk or bud tender, who actually delivers the cannabis to the minor is the person who could get in trouble. What does this mean to you as a bud tender? You may be placed under arrest and charged with a criminal offense. You may have to hire or obtain a defense attorney to defend yourself. You may have to appear in court. You may be fined or imprisoned, or you could even lose your job. Selling cannabis to a minor or allowing a minor to enter and remain upon the retail marijuana store may result in fines or suspension to the retail cannabis store. So again, what does this mean to the licensee? They may receive a fine or even a suspension of their license. They may have to attend an administrative hearing. Multiple violations may result in actual revocation of the license, so they actually might get their license taken away. Financial hardship may affect the business because you're not open for a certain amount of days. They may need to lay off employees during that suspension. So here's a question. If you're ever unsure about the ID or age of a person purchasing cannabis, what should you do? The answer is always going to be do not sell. So remember, you're responsible for every sale of cannabis you make. If you're unsure for any reason, just don't sell. So let's look at these people. Would you sell or not? Do you think they're over the age of 21? Would you guess? They're all under the age of 21. So when you look at the person in the previous slide, did you have to guess their age? Of course you did, unless you actually knew them. What this is saying is you need to check ID of every youthful appearing person as directed by store policy. Remember, if you do not check ID, at some point you're going to be selling to a minor. So here's a scenario. A youthful appearing person walks into your marijuana store. That person hands the ID to the trainee and asks to buy marijuana. The trainee, not knowing how to read the ID, hands it to their trainer. The trainer looks at the ID and says, yeah, they're old enough, and then makes a sale and they walk out of the store. A few minutes later, an enforcement officer walks in and says that you just failed the compliance check. So who would be responsible? The trainee or the trainer? The answer? The person who actually made the sale, so the trainee, is actually responsible and could result in a citation. You control every sale of cannabis you make. Remember, if you're unsure, just don't sell. Here's another question. Are people who want to buy cannabis required or have to present ID? The answer? There is no state law requiring you to check ID. However, state law requires that you do not sell cannabis to persons under the age of 21. Store policy directs which customers are required to show ID. So your store policy could say that all customers that come in have to be asked for their ID. Or their store policy could say, we only accept horizontal driver's license. It is the responsibility of the person making the sale to assure that the customer is legally able and eligible to purchase marijuana products. How to check an ID? First, you actually have to ask for the ID. Ask the customer to hand you their ID and do not accept a person's wallet or purse. Only accept authorized forms of ID. Verify the photograph on the ID matches a customer in front of you. Verify the date of birth and that it equals 21 years or older. Check the ID is not expired, and try and check for security features. What about holes punched in them? A lot of times we get this question on, can I accept an ID with the holes punched in? Yes, you can, as long as the hole does not cover critical information like date of birth, physical description, expiration date, photo, or signature. And remember, if you're unsure about the ID for any reason, just don't sell. Here's some ID checking technology. There's various phone apps, ID scanners, point-of-sale verification systems. ID checking technology is a great tool for determining age and detecting fraudulent ID, but it does not tell you if the card actually belongs to the person presenting it. You always need to verify whether the person presenting the ID matches the ID on the card. Being familiar with ID checking features and the use of identification checking tools is critical to your success. You have to be able to see ID security features in order to check it properly. Some ID checking tools are the actual ID checking guide, actually wearing your glasses, using a magnifying glass if needed, date reminders, or use of black lights. Use of technology is not a substitute for checking someone's ID. By state law, there are only specific forms of ID acceptable for use of purchasing cannabis. Driver's license, instruction permits, enhanced ID cards issued by any U.S. state, territory, District of Columbia, or Canadian province. Valid Washington temporary driver's license when presented in conjunction with the corresponding expired Washington driver's license, U.S. Armed Forces ID card, Merchant Marine ID card issued by the U.S. Coast Guard, passports that includes the passport card, and Washington State tribal enrollment cards that are already approved by the Washington State Liquor and Cannabis Board. Here are some acceptable forms of ID. This is Washington's new format: ID card, driver license, intermediate driver's license, commercial driver's license. These ID cards and driver's license can either be standard or enhanced version. Here's some more information on the new Washington format. More information on the back of the new format. And here's information on the Real ID Act of 2020, which is required by federal law. So how about military IDs? The Washington State Department of Licensing says, we no longer issue licenses with a military expiration date. They now show an expiration date. When you're on active duty, the expiration date can lapse. This means if your license expires, it is still actually valid, regardless of the expiration date. Here's some examples of the old format prior to September 4th, 2018. Here's an example of the older format in horizontal form. Here's an example of the vertical format So this was issued prior to the person turning 21. It was in vertical format. The next two slides showed older IDs that might still be valid. So what about temporary ID cards? The Washington Temporary Driver's License. This became effective February 2017. The Department of Licensing can actually just email you this temporary driver's license. It's important to remember that it's not valid for cannabis sales by itself. So if you see this form, you must have an actual expired license issued with it. So 2 forms of ID if you see this. Here's another security feature. The UV light seal should be visible with a black light. There are 2 types of fraudulent ID use: presenting another person's real ID as their own, or presenting a manufactured, so a fake or altered ID. Fraudulent ID includes presenting real ID that belongs to another person. Example of fraudulent ID use: using a valid 21 or older ID of an older sibling or friend, which we see quite a bit. Using a lost or stolen ID of somebody who's over the age of 21, or using an expired real 21 or older ID of somebody else. Fake ID may appear as any of the acceptable forms of ID. Many fake ID manufacturers offer ID from other states or countries. Out-of-state ID is often used because people are less familiar with the characteristics of the security features. How do you identify fraudulent ID? Ask the customer to hand you their ID and actually feel it. Does it feel right? Verify the ID photo and description matches the person in front of you. Think about their eye color, their height, their weight, their age. If it doesn't match, you could always ask why. Check the ID is expired. Use of an older person's expired ID is one of the most common forms of fraudulent ID. So that's when you think about a person who turned 21 and their ID expired, and instead of throwing it in the garbage or cutting it up, they give it to their younger sibling to use. So that's an example of what you could look out for. Listen to your intuition. Does anything feel off about the person or ID? Ask unexpected questions, like verify information and observe their reaction. An example: what is the zip code on the ID? Or where did you get this ID? How can you identify fraudulent ID? More information? Ask for other documents with their name, address, or photo on it, like a Costco, credit, or student ID card. And watch for duplicate IDs when they open their wallet or purse. So if you ask for their ID and they hand you an ID card and you see multiple other forms of ID, and then they say they don't have another form, you could always kind of be suspicious that they may be lying. Have the person sign their name on a separate piece of paper and compare it with the signature on the ID. Do the signatures actually match? If available, use of ID checking guide to verify the security features listed for that type of ID. If in doubt, challenge the ID. Example: this ID doesn't look like you. Or, do you have another form of ID? Watch for photocopied IDs, which often gain a pink hue. Be aware of cut off numbers or text around the photo, and you can kind of feel for damage like peeling, cracks, or split edges. Look for misspelled words in the document. Check for UV ink that fails to shine under the black light. Never override a point-of-sale system. Be extra alert when your technology is signaling a problem. So if your computer system is telling you do not sell, don't sell, or verify the information. Can I confiscate somebody's ID? Things to consider before you confiscate a fraudulent ID. Any ID, whether it's real or not, is personal property. State law only allows law enforcement officers to detain person or seize property to determine if they're of age or in a restricted area, such as a marijuana store. If you believe a fraudulent ID was presented, you can record the ID on a surveillance system camera and tell the person you're going to call the police. If they run out of the store, you have abandoned property. You must turn that ID over to local law enforcement. Note, it is never worth a physical injury to hold on to a fraudulent ID card, so give the ID back if they become confrontational. Compliance checks. What is the purpose of our compliance checks? The Washington State Liquor and Cannabis Board conducts compliance checks to promote public safety by testing whether marijuana retailers are following state law prohibiting minors from entering and remaining upon their restricted premises, and for minors being sold cannabis products. The Washington State Liquor and Cannabis Board employs minors, or we call them investigative aides, who attempt to purchase marijuana products from marijuana stores. These are our employees, and our investigative aides are always under the age of 21. They do not look deceptively mature for their age. We're not going to send them in there with a beard or anything like that. They do not use fake or altered IDs. They will present either their real ID or none at all. They might say they left it in their car. They can say they are over the age of 21 if asked. People fail compliance checks for a number of preventable reasons. They do not know how to actually check the ID properly. They are never actually trained. They miscalculate the date of birth. They are distracted, hurried, or inattentive to the situation. They cannot read the ID because they don't have their glasses or forgot them at home. They do not use available ID checking tools, or they not properly use ID checking technology. Remember again, if you're unsure about the person's age, just don't sell. For more information, you can always visit our website or contact our customer service or reach out to your local enforcement officer. Thank you very much.